Welcome to the Behavioral View. I'm Nissa Intercho-Van with my co-host Olivia Teal. Each episode, we will talk with practitioners, researchers, and leaders about the work of behavior analysis, how we understand it, how we use it, and how it's evolving. We take a straightforward look at the field, what's working, what's challenging, and how our decisions shape the work we do. Thanks for being here. This is the Behavioral View. If you're looking to earn a CEU, just listen to the full episode and then complete the short quiz that follows. That's all it takes. Hey everyone, welcome to this month's episode of the Behavioral View. You are here listening to episode 6.8. My name is Nissa Intercho-Van. I'm the Director of Clinical Training and CR Institute here at Central Reach. I'm joined by my wonderful co-host, as well as some amazing panelists today. I'm going to let them all introduce themselves. I'm passing it off to Liz.
Hi, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Barajas. I'm a Clinical Solutions Architect and co-host here at Central Reach. Really excited to be here.
All right, we'll pass it over to you, Allison.
Hi, I'm Allison Mosier. I'm the Senior Director of Clinical Quality at BACB.
And Katie.
Hi, I'm Katie. I am a registered behavior technician at BACB.
Thank you so much for joining us today. This is going to be a really exciting conversation. We've got a BCBA and a supervisee on the call, and I know we've had a number of our listeners that are interested in this topic. We've got RBTs who are in graduate school, very interested in getting an idea of what other supervisees are experiencing in their fieldwork. So that's the conversation today, in addition to fieldwork documentation and support systems. So I want to start us all off with two questions. The first one is, everyone on the call has experience working together. How did you all kind of join us today? I know, Liz, you brought both Allison and Katie to us, but where does this relationship stem from?
Well, I guess I can kick that off. So like I said, I'm really excited to have both of you here today because I've had the pleasure, of course, working with Allison. We're going to talk about the BACB Fieldwork program today. And, I had the opportunity to work with her at BACB. And then Katie, of course, is in that program. So really excited to learn more about where you're at in the process.
And where exactly is BACB? And what's your service model there?
Yeah, so BACB is a multidisciplinary agency. We span 6 different states, primarily on the West Coast. We started in San Diego, and then we branched to like the Bay Area, LA, and now we're in Washington, Arizona, Texas, and Virginia and Colorado. Most of our regions do offer ABA, occupational therapy, and speech therapy. Some of our smaller regions might just be like ABA and speech therapy as of right now, but the goal is always to have all 3 of those disciplines under one roof.
Oh, that's fantastic. That sounds kind of like the direction a lot of the field is moving and where we're going with, ABA services and supporting our clients in a holistic fashion. Mm-hmm. As we jump into the conversation, it's going to be a good one. We like to do a question of the day. So for you, Allison and Katie, and Liz, I did not send this in advance because I do think it's fun for us to just kind of pop this in there and have our ad hoc answers right away. But my question of the day for you all is, for those of us that have been through the fieldwork, and then for you, Katie, who's in the fieldwork now, what's your number one memory of the overall experience of fieldwork and supervision? And I'll give you all time to really think about that, and I'll share my answer about fieldwork and supervision. And my number one memory is truly the relationship I built with my fieldwork supervisors. Mine was all via telehealth. They did come in once a month to see me. I was in Chicago at the time. But the relationship that I built with those 2 individuals who provided my fieldwork was probably the best training I had on the floor. Once I went from a technician just working with learners and having that monthly supervision to actual tailored supervision towards coursework, that really became foundational to my experience. I think the coursework helped understand the science and the philosophy, but taking that and working with BCBAs with a specific client really improved my knowledge. So understanding, what that looked like and building that relationship is probably my favorite memory of fieldwork.
Yeah, that's great. I feel like mine's a little bit different. I had been in the field for a really long time before I ever decided to go back to school and accrue my field work. So I felt at the time that my coursework wasn't really giving me a lot of new information. I mean, some of it definitely was, but I feel like maybe the first year that I was accruing my hours, it was a little lackluster in terms of like my on the job training. And then I decided to make a switch to a different agency. And I do feel like that's where I really learned a lot. I had a really awesome supervisor who taught me a lot of really cool things about like how to like skill acquisition, because I primarily had experience with behaviors and I was really struggling with the skill acquisition piece. But I still feel that the first year as a BCBA, I learned way more in my first year as a BCBA than I did my entire field work. And I think that's why I'm so passionate now about MEB's fieldwork candidate program, because a lot of what I hear from people is they have similar experiences to mine, which is they didn't feel like their fieldwork totally prepared them. And I don't think there's ever going to be a model that 100% prepares you for every situation that you can come across, because there's a lot of nuance. But I think that's why we've modeled our program to kind of highlight those gaps that we tend to experience and see.
Awesome. And for me, it's a little similar to you, Nisa. It's like, especially the relationships that I've built with the supervisors. One memory that really, really stands out to me is about 2 weeks ago, I was able to shadow my supervisor doing a VB map, but I got to probe some targets. We pulled out the book. We ran some programs, and like light bulbs were going off in my head. A couple months prior, Allison has set up the curriculum book within Central Reach. And so I took my first kind of go at doing the VB map assessment and reviewing it online. But it was really cool to put this into practice in real life, in a real situation. And that was really, really memorable for me.
That's awesome.
Gosh, I love to hear that.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're making me really think about just those milestones that, at least when I think about what immediately popped in my head when Nessa asked that question was just the different milestones of celebration, from having that conversation with someone that's thinking about pursuing certification to them, getting enrolled in their classes, and then just having those moments where they're like, oh yes, I finally got to do this finally. And I'm so excited that I learned how to do this. And then I think the most memorable, of course, is getting that phone call where they tell you they passed the exam. Like that, those phone calls, those conversations, those will forever stay with me. Just knowing that I had the opportunity to be a part of someone's journey, especially when it's from start to finish, or even when I have, and I shouldn't say finish because it never ends, right? Even having the opportunity to see someone move into a director level role, after getting, even more experience out in the field after they've gotten certified. So when I think about just the overall experience and what's most rewarding, it really is just those moments, those just milestones that take place across the whole experience. So at least for me, that's what sticks. So
I love that. We're setting the foundation for hopefully what is a really enlightening podcast, not just for BCBAs, but hopefully for RBTs that are in graduate school, because we know that, like you're saying, Liz, choosing a program is difficult. Once you're into the program, getting into your courses, but also managing that work-life balance of working as an RBT directly in the field. But we also are hearing that, fieldwork documentation is difficult for a lot of these trainees. So, kicking us off, we sent some information over to Allison and Katie, just so we could kind of guide the conversation, and it will go naturally in the direction in which it goes with this conversation. But, starting us off, I would love to hear from what's happening at MEBE and both of your perspectives. What does it look like in terms of fieldwork documentation? How does someone enter the program that you have at MEBE from the beginning and then all the way up to starting to accrue those fieldwork hours?
Yeah, so we have a formal application process that requires, a resume, a letter of rec, and all of that. And then I go through and I review it with one of my team members, and then we accept them into the program and we give them a list of like, these are the 10 things you have to do first. And in those first 10 things, getting your supervision contract signed, understanding the difference between the requirements for if you are being overseen by a first-year BCBA versus somebody who is not a first-year BCBA, because I'm finding a lot of people don't understand the difference and why, there's different standards there. We do have like an orientation that they go through as well. We basically get all of their documentation set up. Everybody has their own drive folder and it's theirs, and they put all of their stuff in there, and then they have that for their entire journey. And then they do a fluency quiz that's based on our handbook, but also the BACB fieldwork resources. And then they do that quiz, and then they schedule like a formal check-in meeting with me where I kind of go through and make sure all of the ducks are in a row. So that way, if they haven't started classes yet, they're ready to go when they start their first class. Or if they've already started classes, we can make sure that they're set up so they can start tracking their hours as soon as possible. And then I really spend that first meeting telling them what's going to happen monthly going forward. And that's where I see and I feel the stress come from them, because it's a lot, especially because a lot of times when I'm meeting with new candidates, they're just now starting on their educational journey. So they're getting ready to start grad school, and they're taking a huge career pivot potentially. And then now they're learning about all of the fieldwork requirements and stuff. So one of the things that we use at MEBE to kind of help alleviate some of that stress is the Ripley trackers. There's like a paid version and a free version. We've had really no issues with the free version. Obviously, that's independent of the BACB. But the thing that I've noticed that kind of decreases some of that stress is it goes through what the requirements are each month. So it kind of tells you, hey, of all of the things that you've input for this month, it meets this requirement, it meets this requirement, and so on and so forth. And if it doesn't meet one of the requirements, we determine if there's something that we can edit or if those hours don't count for that month. And my goal is that every month their hours count.
Yep.
And so I give them all of that information up front. And then every single month they submit their fieldwork form, their monthly verification form. They submit a screenshot or a Ripley report so I can go through and verify. And then we have like a secondary tracker that we use at MEBE. It's just a Google spreadsheet where they update their hours every single month with like a running total, and they send like a screenshot of that. So I can verify all three things match, make sure there's no weird, something was dated wrong or a number, the decimal moved. So that way it gives them some confidence that they won't have to worry about when it's time to submit all of their stuff at the end of their program, that there's a form from a year and a half prior that doesn't count because there was an error on it. So I do find that the first month or two is really a lot of more intrusive prompting and more hand holding. And then I find that once they kind of get in the swing of things, I can kind of fade that. And then usually they're pretty smooth sailing after that. I do find that getting them set up is quite a bit of work. But it's necessary.
I love that. This jogs so many memories from my own experience because it dates myself, but a lot of mine was manual. So pen and paper, taking it to my supervisors and then manually calculating it and making sure it matched. But I have a couple questions before I ask you, Katie, a few questions. The first one is, how many individuals that are supervisees do you accept into your program? And what are the requirements prior to being accepted? Like, do they have to be accepted into a master's program, or do they have to have taken their first course?
Yes, great question. So right now we have 49 candidates who are currently in coursework or graduated and still accruing those last fieldwork hours. To be accepted into the program, they have to have been accepted or started in coursework. So usually what happens is if people are thinking of going back to school, a lot of them will meet with me first to talk about schooling options and kind of like what's the best fit for them. And so usually by the time that they're getting to the point where they're applying, I'm pretty aware that they're very close. And then I just say, hey, let me know when you get your acceptance letter, and then we'll get you all set up. So that way everything is all ready to go by the time you start your first class, because you never want to like have to get all of those 10 things set up the first week that you're starting grad school. So I try really hard to be very proactive and have them be proactive with me. So that way it's just less stress when they actually start their first class.
Yeah. So I imagine, you have a good number of maybe candidates. That's a lot of like just having to understand that people are coming in at different stages of the process. I assume you have people that are coming in that maybe worked at other organizations and have maybe accrued some. How are you like working with each of these individuals and kind of making sure that they're getting what they need? How do you navigate that?
Yeah, it's interesting because I would say in the last like 2 to 3 months, a lot of our new candidates have come from other agencies. So they're either halfway through their hours, or I've had several that are a few months away from getting all of their hours and they just not getting what they need somewhere else. So it's been an interesting shift lately, because for forever it was just like people brand new, they started at maybe they started their masters while they were at maybe, but I'm not really seeing that lately. And it's been really interesting. I mean, we have pretty extensive documentation of like when I meet with people, I take notes on everything. So I have like exactly like, what was discussed, what action items were given and stuff like that. And we have pretty extensive records. So everybody gets the same amount of mentorship and resources when they come to me, regardless of where they're at. And then I always say, they are more than welcome to meet with us more. We have, minimums for the program, but Katie's one of the ones that definitely goes over the minimum requirements and meets more and does more. I always say you get what you put into the program. That's my big philosophy with them. Yeah.
So I want to pivot a little over to Katie and just ask you a few questions about documentation. As the supervisee in the program, first question, where are you in your fieldwork currently? How many years into your graduate program are you?
Yeah, so I started my master's in March of 2025. So I'm actually going to be finishing this August. And I'm about halfway. I'm just about a little over halfway with my fieldwork hours. One thing that it's really exciting. I feel like I have a lot left to learn, but I also am so excited to like close the schools chapter, have gained those foundational skills, and then move directly into focusing on the field work, being in the field, learning from the supervisors. Maybe has been amazing with the amount of mentorship that I've received, Allison being one of them, just from the start. She really set up a foundation for success and clarity. And that was really helpful to ease anxiety about kind of how to properly accomplish the field work.
What has been the most confusing part of fieldwork? I think that's a big one that I hear often from supervisees that I oversee, is very much like you're saying, Allison, that first month or two of just documentation. But from your perspective, Katie, what has been the most confusing part related to requirements, restricted and unrestricted requirements, signatures, hours caps?
Yeah, so when I first started, it was unrestricted versus restricted. It was pretty confusing, but this was before we had the fluency quiz, before we met with Allison. So those soon were clarified with the knowledge that we were provided when we entered the candidate program. I would also love to mention that the new BACB self-assessment tool I just recently took, and it's a 25-question quiz that basically prompts you with the correct. If you get an answer wrong, it provides you with feedback. Okay. And it's talking all about the fieldwork requirements, gives you real life scenarios. So that was really cool to see that they've uploaded that. And then I think another challenge that I had was the Ripley multiplier. So I do use Ripley, which I absolutely have had a really great positive experience with it, because I take my custom secondary tracker, which I've highlighted and categorized. So each day, I don't know if you're going to stop and ask me a question about like my documentation practice, but
yeah, share everything.
Yeah, okay. So each month I set a goal for the exact type of indirect and direct hours I want to meet. And so I use a secondary tracker that I took from Maybe, but I made it my own. And so every evening when I get home from work, I revisit this, and so each category is highlighted. For instance, when I do an FBA shadow or I host shadow sessions with new hires, they're each a different color. Or when I'm shadowing supervisors directly doing assessments. And then I can kind of customize and use my last month. So each section each log has a description. And so I can use the previous descriptions that I will then be entering into Ripley at the end of the month. So it's very kind of like systematic when it comes to not having to reword things, just having things nice and clear. So I log the day at the end of the day, and I make sure to log the supervised hours that I get to make sure I'm meeting the 90-minute requirement for concentrated, because that's the path I'm doing. And so at the end of the month, I look at my central reach and I implement my direct hours, because I can go and look at my calendar, and then I stop at the amount of hours that I've already. So let's say my goal was 20 this month. After I've hit 20 in my tracker, I no longer have to count anymore.
Yeah.
And then after completing the secondary tracker on the last day of the month, I input everything into Ripley. And I start this a couple days before, just to break it into chunks so I have enough time, because it does take a little bit of time. And then, as Allison's mentioned, we have our Google Doc and Google Drive tracker. So we upload everything there. I upload copies to my desktop. She's made it super easy and seamless. We have a tracker that has your total hours, your total overview. And so then just easily download the monthly verification form from Ripley. And I think it's definitely challenging to manage alongside your field work, alongside your coursework.
Yeah.
But if you have a system in place, it took a little while to create, but now it's like, it's in my calendar. I have like a little star, like Ripley, spend an hour doing it. The next day, spend another hour. And so it's just there.
Yeah.
So many good things
Really?
here. The first one, sorry, Liz, is that BACB self-assessment, right? We've seen the field has shifted really heavily in the last year or two to reflexivity. So even as BCBAs, we engage in a lot of self-assessment practices. There are a lot of literature now that support that as well. So I love to hear that you are doing that as a supervisee and trainee. I have a question that has really piqued my interest. What is this fluency quiz? Is this an internal development that you've designed, Allison?
Yeah. So actually, Liz was the one who started the candidate program at MEB. And so we've always had some sort of like get ready quiz just to kind of make sure that we know what the difference between like the restricted versus unrestricted, the general minimum and maximum requirements and stuff like that. When I revamped the candidate program last year with the 6th edition test outline, and like the new 2027 requirements, and with that revamp, I redid the entire fluency like quiz that they do to start. And I actually did take the self-assessment tool on the BACB website, and I was pleased to find that a lot of the questions were very similar to the fluency quiz that we do. However, I got some ideas, and like there's a couple of nuanced situations that I think I need to add in there, because basically, if someone gets below a certain score on that quiz, I counsel them and make sure they really understand the differences, why a BCABA can't be supervision and it has to be a BCBA, why that person who is under a year has to be mentored by somebody with 5 or more years of experience. Because at the end of the day, I want their hours to count and I want them to learn. But if their scores are really low on that, I don't think we're quite ready to like kind of let them be off on their own. So those fluency quizzes really help me kind of determine how much support they're going to need in the beginning. And I have found, since implementing like some orientation and some in other documents and FAQs and stuff, those quiz scores have been a lot higher at the start of the program, but also too, like I said earlier, we're getting a lot of people who are midway through their fieldwork lately.
Yeah.
So they are usually pretty privy to all of the BACB requirements.
Yeah, so there's so much effort that really needs to go in early on to make sure that we get it right, and that there's like really strong understanding of how everything works. Sounds like, Katie, you've got a really good organization system on your own, in addition to what maybe is providing you. And it seems like combined, I'm immediately thinking that's going to really set you up for success as a BCBA, because there are so many things that you
100%.
have, right? Time management, having to juggle, just so many different things. And so the fieldwork, as we're discussing, right, can be a little bit overwhelming. So I'm glad to hear that there's all these tools in place supporting you. And it also just kind of makes me think about the stress that so many students must be going through. What it must feel like, what it means if you do it wrong. Like, I know I've had experiences where I've had, like you mentioned, Allison, you have people coming from other organizations that come to you. Maybe, I don't know if anyone else here has experienced it, where they say, oh, I didn't document any of this, or I don't have contact with this person, or I was doing this completely wrong. So what does the stress of, doing it wrong actually feel like? Has it ever gotten in the way of focusing on the client in front of you, I guess, to be more specific, Katie?
Yeah, so one thing first, I definitely try to leave any of like the fieldwork stress, all of that at home. I'm with the client, I'm there, I'm chasing them, I'm very present. Chasing them, we're playing, we're interacting, but they want to be chased.
Good
Clarification
there.
just clarification. But I mean, just anxiety about like, are my hours going to count? Am I going to get approved? Am I going to get accepted to take the exam? I think that's something that's just ongoingly there. But I think with the ease of like, we have systems in place, we have an amazing mentorship. Allison's been extremely encouraging. There's no need to let that worry thought continue on. And yeah, I think it's probably very real though for a lot of students, a lot of candidates.
Yeah.
If you could have asked yourself, or if there was a wish on day one that you could have now that you're really far along in your timeline, what do you wish you would have learned to be prepared for all of this? Or what's something you can impart on individuals listening who are thinking about going back to school or just about to apply?
I think for me, making sure you have a system in place that's effective from month one. Maybe it'll take a little bit of trial and error month one, but continuing to have an organized system. I wish I was kind of told like this is exactly the system you should do, but I think that's part of it is figuring it out. So I think that's my answer. And then to jump off that, also one more thing is just clarity on the final verification form. I did have to complete one. And it's a little confusing because they don't want you to have the multiplier for concentrated. They make you calculate the hours by hand. So I think just maybe a checklist or some type of information like this is how you fill out the final verification form.
Ooh, that's a good point. And I think at the beginning, right, students aren't thinking about that. So knowing that up front will help them as they prepare. Okay. We've seen some documentation shifts. We've seen some requirement shifts from the board. And I think one of the things that has been really, again, my opinion is it's been really helpful for the supervisees that I work with. But I'd love to hear everyone's insights here is moving the supervision and the kind of conversation and mentorship tied to a specific real client. How has that shift happened at Navy and what does that look like from both your perspectives?
Yeah, so it was not a huge shift because we were doing a lot of that already. Although I know in our curriculum that we've made for our fieldwork program, I'm really big on like find your niche in ABA, whether that's working with early intervention or toilet training or sleep training. And so I have like a lot of the modules that are in relation to different niches you can have. And if I have the SBT or the skills-based training module, it's kind of hard to apply that to a real client if you don't work with a client who maybe is a good candidate for SBT. Same thing if you are trying to learn about toilet training and like the Fox Nazarene approach, but all of your learners are 12 years old and toilet trained. It can be a little bit tricky for those niches. But I think overall we have like a wide range of clientele. And so if somebody is working with at least a few clients or, we primarily work in center-based instruction. So if you don't particularly work with a client where this applies to, there probably is one in the same classroom or the next classroom over that we can maybe arrange for you to try these things because we are in applied science after all. But it was mainly kind of just updating some of our assignments to be clearer about, this is great to kind of build up your foundational knowledge. Now let's practical application part. Let's if we're learning about how to contrive opportunities to increase manding, like let's apply this with your client and see if you see a shift in the data. So it did require just a lot of updating language for us and clarification. But beyond that, it was already kind of there.
That's great to hear. And then for you, Katie, did you feel a shift there or any experiences that were different?
Yeah, well, so one thing that I just like stood out. It's a simple thing, but like doing a live preference assessment with a client for part of the curriculum book, that was really pivotal, being able to explain and analyze real client scenarios while doing the candidate work in the curriculum book in Central Reach. It really hits home and allows the foundational knowledge that we've learned in coursework to be applied in real time.
And that last sentence is huge. Like, I feel like that is such a quote for this conversation, in that you could be in school learning about the science and the technology, and then you go into your clinic setting and maybe it's happening, but if you're not sure of that translation, if your BCBAs aren't naming it for you, it's really hard to see where that application comes into play. So I love hearing that. I think there are going to be two main questions from our audience and our listeners. One, are you willing to share some of your documentation? If not, we can say no, but I know we get that a lot when we've got specific organizations that come on. A lot of other colleagues in the field are like, oh, can I get connected with this panelist, or can I meet with them? And then number two, you've both talked about this curriculum in Central Reach designed by MEBE. Can you walk us through? I know I'm pivoting a little bit from our chat, but what is that curriculum? Who designed it? Where does it live? What's it based on? Because it sounds like an amazing program.
Yeah, it's me. I made it. It took me several months, and it was anticipation with the 6th edition test outline, and just wanting to revamp stuff to kind of based on feedback of what I was seeing from first year BCBAs, is that at least ones that grew within our program, because I'm always looking for feedback. One of my big things is like, tell me the critiques. You're not going to hurt my feelings. This program is not for me. It's for you. I want to make you as prepared as possible. And so based on that feedback that I had compiled from people who had graduated from our program, I made some updates. But basically, I took the 6th edition test outline in our ethics code, and I made essentially an assignment for every single item. And there's various research articles, there's various videos, there's practical applications, there's competencies where you're tying it all together. And it's supposed to make up a lot of hours. And there's even, I've even put in a prompt where you're like halfway through, where if you have not worked with a client who has severe challenging behaviors, and I operationally defined it, now is the time to request one of those kids. So because a lot of what I'm also seeing from when I'm meeting with first year BCBAs is like, yeah, I didn't really work with like severe challenging behaviors as a BT. And now as a BCBA, I'm struggling. And I'm like, okay. And that's interesting because that was not my experience at all. I had lots of experience with behaviors for a really long time. Right. And that's not something I thought about. And so I was like, okay, this is really interesting. And so, putting in a prompt in there, like, if you're a candidate and you're halfway through your program and you've got a lot of hours under your belt, if you haven't worked with a kid who has some aggression or some pretty severe elopement, now is the time to learn it as a BT so you can be better prepared for it as a BCBA. And then in addition, I've also added in a lot of soft skills because I know I struggled with the soft skills like conflict resolution, how to tell a parent that, no, you don't, for your child, we can't guarantee an experienced RBT with 2 years of experience with your child, or, how to go to an IEP meeting and know how to like stay in your lane, but like collaborate. And so I did build a bunch of like tools and activities and competencies based on that as well. And also too, when I added based on feedback was how to manage a caseload. And so I have it, and I use shaping. All of it is like shaping and building and stuff. And it was actually really fun to make. And I'll kind of go back to something Katie was saying earlier in a second, but for the managing a caseload, I say, here's a pretty straightforward caseload where all of the puzzle pieces fit perfectly. Practice putting that in on a monthly calendar and making sure you do your parent training and your 10% supervision and your 5% RBT supervision. Cool. Now that's fluent, now you've got 6 reports due in the same.
Wrench in there. This is real life.
Yeah, because again, like those are the things that you just don't learn. And those are the biggest struggle. I have found that a lot of us are really good clinically. Like the decision making is there. We're good at looking at the data and making, prompt delays versus do we add a prompt level in, or, what kind can we vary the SD? Do we need to get the client's attention or change the reinforcement schedule? Like that, we're always really solid on. I'm struggling managing my caseload. How do I plan out a month? How do I plan around 6 reports due in the same month? Because that just seems to always happen. And I actually add things all of the time. The reason why I put it in Central Reach, it's basically in the courses and training, like in our library, is if I find like a really cool article that was posted by JABA or ABAI this last month that I think would benefit, I can add it in there and let all of the candidates know, like, hey, it's living in this folder now. But also too, kind of going back to what Katie was saying earlier of like applying the stuff you learn in school in your actual practice. It was really interesting when I was making the curriculum, especially like section A of the task list, like the philosophical underpinnings and assumptions. I remember learning about it. I remember doing my exam about it and all that stuff. And I do feel like A is the one that kind of gets dumped a little bit from your brain once you've taken your exam. But when I was sitting there and looking and trying to be thoughtful about those things, I realized, oh my gosh, parsimony and pragmatism every single day. Yeah. I use those every single day. Oh my gosh, radical versus mentalism or radical versus methodological. Like they're not just words that you learn in school. Like those are things that we like just, and it actually made me more fluent in those. And now I love talking about section A, which like, I think I never really gave it a mind before. And I've been trying to tell the candidates too, like A really matters. There's a reason why it's the first thing on there. And it's not this weird abstract thing. It's actually something that we can apply every single day and we should be applying every single day. And it was just really interesting.
I want to ask about feedback, right? We've talked about all these different activities and experience that, these candidates are getting. How are you navigating, or how are you navigating, and what recommendations do you have as far as ensuring that, adequate feedback is being provided with regards to documentation, but just also the fieldwork overall, right? All these different experiences.
Yeah. I try to send out surveys at least twice a year. I'm actually in the process of compiling my survey this time. I always have the opportunity to submit them anonymously. But I also am really, really open and transparent with all of my candidates. Like I said, my philosophy is you're not going to hurt my feelings. These hours are for you. I want you to be the best BCBA day one as you can be. Obviously, you're always learning and stuff like that. But I was like, if there is an assignment that you feel like is not applicable, if you feel like there's something that's missing, like you are not going to hurt my feelings. And I ask for that feedback often. And I'm big on bi-directional feedback. I have to give them feedback about their assignments and stuff like that. And so that's a two-way street. And honestly, I think them learning to give their supervisor or their mentor feedback is also a really important skill for them to develop, because when they're a BCBA, they might have to give feedback to a director. And when there's a power dynamic, that can be really tricky. I know I've been in spots where I don't feel like I can give that feedback, but I also never really learned that skill until I was well into being a BCBA. So I try really hard of like, what are the key skills that they need? How do I develop those? And part of that is being able to give feedback, receive it for one, but also give it as well.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit you mentioned mentors. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So we have a lot of BCBAs here at MEB, kind of spanning all of our states and stuff. And we do have approved mentors, like ones that have, have certain scores on their quality assurance checks and stuff like that, and are open to it, because some of them are not, open to like meeting with candidates, which is fine. And so they have the option to meet with many BCBAs. One of my big things too, because of my fieldwork experience, I primarily got most of my quality supervision under one BCBA. And I think having multiple BCBAs, multiple perspectives is key, because, and I'm big on this too, is like, yes, I've been in the field for a while. Yes, I have a lot of experience, but I'm not the end all be all for all of this. So please go talk to somebody who maybe has a way different background to kind of get their perspective, because sometimes there isn't one right answer. For sometimes there is, but sometimes it's just really important to get comprehensive feedback and mentorship from multiple people. Also too, I really love even the ones that are first year BCBAs, their perspective is also really valuable as well. One of the first assignments that they kind of do as they're getting started in the program is they interview a couple of BCBAs. And I try really hard to say, interview a fresh one, fresh after exam, maybe 6 months in, and then maybe one who's been a BCBA for 5 or more years. Because you'll find that a lot of their answers are very similar, but also they might have a variety of perspectives.
I have a question as it relates to the curriculum, these assignments, and kind of the whole practice. This comes up often in supervision, but it's the difference between restricted and unrestricted and being paid for unrestricted. So a lot of organizations pay for the face-to-face time of working with a learner because that is how they bill. What is the philosophy or the requirement to go from, that percentage of face-to-face to less of the restricted and more towards unrestricted? And then are these candidates paid for that time?
Yeah, so we have 2 pathways of our candidate program. Well, technically 3. The first one, we call it the balanced pathway. That's self-paced. It's perfect for somebody who's in their master's program and can't commit to a lot of hours like while they're in their master's program. Then we have the focused pathway, which is a little bit more limited, but it's great for somebody who is done with their master's and they really just want to buckle down and get their hours done. And we have been able to create a tiered model where based on how many unrestricted hours you have, you fall within a certain model. And whatever model you're in, you get a percentage of your unrestricted hours every single month paid at your clinical rate. So not like a minimum wage or an admin rate, because it varies from state to state, but it's your clinical rate, which is reinforcing because the more hours you accrue, the more you get paid for it. And then the third option, which is really awesome if that region and their payers allow for it, is having mid-level supervisors. So we call them program supervisors here at MIBI, someone who is well on their way to being a BCBA or a BCABA, but they just don't have their letters yet. But they meet competencies, they meet requirements, they have their masters, and they can potentially be given a small caseload, and they can accrue a lot of their unrestricted hours that way. Other than that, for those who are in that first pathway where it's more self-paced, we have really strict rules about what is allowed versus what's not allowed. So our main rule is if you're doing something that benefits MIBI, we have to pay you. It needs approval. So it kind of goes through me. And I approve like shadowing and stuff, but the shadowing is like very clear. Like you're just shadowing, you can ask your questions. But if you're probing something, if you're probing a target for parent training, we have to know that so we can pay you accordingly.
Wow, this is fantastic and such a structured program that I think, is so important for all of these candidates that you're speaking of across the different states. Now, I know we've talked a lot about the experience. I think we could go all day on this conversation. There's some areas that we actually haven't even gotten to, but I do want to make sure that we talk about the practical strategies. I want people to listen and be able to kind of walk away with, okay, here's how my fieldwork is going, or here is how my organization designs it. And something I say a lot to my apprentice team, which is what we call them where I work, is that they do own a lot of their supervision, right? That they have to, like you're saying, Allison, provide the feedback, document on their own, that we set them up. But a lot of the experience, bringing in what they're learning in their courses, because we are not their faculty. But, I've got students who share their syllabi, share what they've learned so we can make sure that we're tying that back in. But let's go a little bit back to that self-assessment, self-management that we talked about, that Katie sounds like is working really well for you. Monthly verification forms. This is something that a lot of organizations have different rules, different responsibilities. How do you structure that in terms of review? It sounds like you are doing a lot of that review, Allison, but what if it's another behavior analyst that is overseeing most of their time? Do you meet with them? Is there a requirement there for them to communicate? And then do you also have a hard and fast deadline on when these can be submitted and signed for approval?
Yeah. So we have a very, very strict regimented way of how we do monthly verification forms. So I used to be the one to sign all of the forms. And as we've grown, we've decentralized it a little bit. So each region, there's a responsible signer who has been trained on what are the expectations. And then they approve and they sign. What I had found is that we were seeing some errors because I do audits like every quarter in our drive, and I'm saying, hey, this form shouldn't have been signed. It didn't meet the requirements, or it was signed on the wrong date. And so now what they do is they still send it to the responsible signer but I am CC'd on those emails with like the Ripley, the monthly verification form, and then our G Sheet tracker. And then I go through and I will with the responsible supervisor, I'll be like, this is why this form has to be fixed. This one's good to go. This is why, to build up that fluency. So I'm a little bit prompting right now, like, hey, this form's good to go, or hey, so-and-so, you need to fix this. And that has been a lot better. I just did another audit and I saw way less errors. So I'm always taking data on these things to see, like, the data will tell you the story. If we're seeing the same rate of errors or the same percentage of errors, then clearly something we're doing is not working. So I do feel that we're on the path of those improvements. And then as far as our deadline's a lot stricter than the BACBs. So my rule in the candidate program is all of your stuff needs to be in for signature by the end of the first week of the next month, instead of the 30 days of like the next calendar month.
Yeah.
The reason for that being is I have to go through 49 different people's documentation and I want to make sure that everything is in within that window in case something does need to be fixed. But B, I'm really big on you need to stick to your deadlines because I am seeing, again, the soft skills, right, of how to manage and get reports in on time so kids don't have a lapse in services. And so I'm like, if you have a known deadline and you have the tools to make sure that you are able to meet that, I think it's very reasonable. But I also, one of my big things too, is if you are running into a barrier, say your Ripley is not working or your laptop gets wet and you need a new one, I'm big on, if you are proactive in your communication with me, we will make exceptions as long as it's within that BACB 30-day like calendar month window. But if you're not being proactive with me, then I will not make an exception. And unfortunately, your hours for this month don't count. And I've definitely had some people who have been upset in the past, and I always explain my rationale. This is the reason why, is because I'm not saying no because you had barriers. When you're a BCBA, if you're working on a report and Central Reach for whatever reason glitches, or maybe again your laptop, like sometimes I've had kids accidentally break my laptop. It happens. Don't sit on it. Talk to your director. Talk to me, because I'm really, really I'm flexible, but I'm not flexible if there's no communication. And so I have found that it was a little bit of a pain point at first, and a lot of people were getting their forms in late, and we had some upset candidates. But now that we're like well established with that expectation, and I put like reoccurring reminders based on some feedback, and stuff like that, and that has been really helpful. And then I even used to prompt like in our group space on like GChat, hey, remember forms are in on this Friday. After that, I stopped doing that as well, because again, no one's going to reach out to you to tell you, hey, remember your kid's report is due this Friday. And I have found that the rationale, not just saying, hey, this is the rule, this is how it has to be, but this is why we have the rule. This is why I'm such a stickler for this. It helps that light bulb go off. And I feel a little bit more confident that if they do have a couple of reports due in 1 month, that I feel confident that they're going to be able to meet those requirements and make sure their kids are getting their services.
Yeah, it really sounds like the focus isn't just on the short term of let's just get you these hours. It's let's get you these hours, yes, but let's also make sure you genuinely, truly are ready. I can vouch for you, ready to be a BCBA, and that you understand the expectations from the day to day, lots of deadlines, lots of multitasking, while still providing a lot of early support, right? To make sure that it's minimal overwhelming. Like, we want to set you up for success. So I love that I'm hearing that, because I think, just looking at the data, we have so many green, very, very new BCBs, and it's important that everyone just understands the career and the workload and the expectations that they're entering. And so, yeah, the soft skills are so critical, right? So that's great.
Yeah.
I'd love to pivot over to you, Katie, on the same conversation of just what are some barriers. It's been a while since I've been in that hot seat as someone working in the field and tracking my hours and going to school. What has been your experience in navigating all of these requirements, as a supervisee, while also hopefully having a work-life balance?
Yeah. So I think I am big about my calendar and scheduling, basically I have like a color coded, like school's green, candidate work is orange, personal stuff is purple, and yoga is like pink. And so I just make sure to, with the deadlines in place, it really helps me set up myself for success by making sure to do my Ripley the 28th, 29th, 30th of the month, and then sending it in on the first of each month. So I think to eliminate any barriers that might come up if my computer breaks, if I have a crazy assignment due at school and I just don't have time for it. Maybe I finish my tracking on the 28th so I can spend the last 2 days of the month focusing on school. I think time management has really, really been key for me and my mental health and well-being. And then to throw a random fun fact, I practice yoga every single morning to keep myself sane, and it's my everything. I'm also breathwork certified, so I like do little breathwork before tests. And so yeah, just making sure that I have a work-life balance as well.
I love that. That leans right into that self-care that we know is so important. Or I don't want to say, because I know self-care for a while was a buzzword, but like it is so important in the work that we're doing, and especially for those of you that are students, to set aside time for yourself, whatever that's going to look like in your own practice.
Yeah. And I don't know if you're doing an online or in-person program, master's program, but I imagine, it probably is helpful to have other students that you're connecting with, that you can ask questions to. I know it sounds like maybe has a lot of tools and resources. Now the BACB is asking, but it's nice to be like, hey, how are you navigating this? Do you have colleagues maybe from your classes or maybe that you connect with or online?
That's one thing that I don't really have. I do have it at MEB though with other candidates, but so I'm currently taking school online. And so there's been one class where I had a phone number of a student, but we do our online discussion posts. So we're engaging with each other online through an online forum, but there's no like personal classroom group text or student text. So I definitely have taken initiative in connecting with the candidates at MEB and talking to them about their coursework. Someone just got hired. He's actually just got hired as a program supervisor. He came from a new company. We're like talking about BCBA exam stuff. He like recommended a good book. I'm like connecting with I just connect because I have the gratitude of being in person at MEB at the Learning Center where, school is not in person for me.
Yeah.
And Allison set up a great candidate group chat where we're all in that chat together. You can get someone's contact information. We all can kind of, talk about what works for you. How are you navigating, this tantrum or something like that.
Yeah. And I try really hard if somebody is coming to me and having meetings with me about something that I don't necessarily have experience with, because I did my field work back in 2015 and 2016. So I didn't have Ripley. All of my stuff was pen and paper. The requirements were different.
Right.
The task list was different. The way that you took the exam was different. And so sometimes I'll ask a candidate, do you want me to like connect you with somebody who's been in a similar situation with the similar resources, so that way you can get it straight from like an actual peer? And so a lot of times they'll say yeah, and I connect them personally, which has been really helpful too.
That's great. And I think for those online programs, one of the recommendations I make with my students that are online is to reach out to each other in the discussion posts or find each other via email. At the program I'm at, there are some cohorts where we've got one student that just immediately drops into the discussion, hey, I would love all of your numbers in a WhatsApp format. So that is something that I've seen work for those online master's students to just, talk about assignments and their coursework together. So that's been a really great way to collaborate. But again, on the floor where you can speak about clients together, especially in your same center, is also helpful. Across regions, I know sometimes you can't share as much client information, but just knowing that you're in the same program sounds like a nice group of individuals to share with. Okay, we have talked about so many things and we are close to time. So I want to make sure that we stay in the best interest of time and really give some takeaways to our listeners today. I think we've covered a whole gamut and range of topics on supervision. I really appreciate you both for sharing your insights. As takeaways, what are some things you'd love our listeners to learn from this conversation and to leave them with as they go into maybe wrapping their fieldwork. Katie, I wanted to ask you about your BCBA, your exam prep, but I think that will probably be for a whole nother episode because that's a whole big topic to open up at the end. But any words of wisdom that everyone on the panel has for supervisees and supervisors?
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, my advice is if you are a supervisor, you need to do the self-assessment fieldwork tool because it's really enlightening. And I recommend that for supervisees too, because I would hate for somebody to find out years down the line if maybe they got audited that something that they thought counted actually didn't. And sometimes it's a little vague on the BACB website because a lot of that is open to interpretation, but there is very specific interpretation that needs to be there. So that I think that tool is actually really helpful in clarifying some of those interesting kind of gray areas. Also, too, as a supervisor, you need to read the newsletters. The newsletters, I print them out every single time. It's like the only thing I print. And I look over that. I read them several times to make sure I'm understanding because sometimes there are big updates in there. And I would hate for anything that I have in my program for the candidates to not count because I wasn't up to date with the requirements. And then the last thing is be organized. If there is a system in place that doesn't work for you, that's fine. Communicate with your person, figure out something that works for you because you need to be on top of your paperwork or else you're going to have a huge headache when it's time to submit all of your paperwork. And you just never, you have to adopt a little bit of like acceptance and commitment therapy. Be a little bit discomforted right now, but like figure out what works for you. So that way in the long run, you are prepared. I always say I never really learned how to study until I had to study for the BCBA exam. Because I was like essentially forced to, because it was so like high stakes. Same thing with your field work. I made a lot of mistakes earlier on and didn't have a lot of hours count. So I had to get it together and figure out a system that worked for me. And then it worked. Be organized, be up to date with the BACB requirements. And then the self-assessment tool is huge.
Good advice.
Anyone else?
And then for me, I think Allison really had some great points there. And I think creating a system in place that to keep yourself organized. And then I also think taking a step back and viewing fieldwork as a process and a step in the right direction as you become a BCBA. Really looking at this like, this is going to help me meet reports on time, schedule my calendar, meet those deadlines just by submitting your monthly verification form at the end of each month and continuously making it a habit to even just track your hours. Okay, so instead of tracking my fieldwork hours, I'm going to track my hours that I supervise my client. So it's going to translate in the long run.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I'm pausing for you, Liz, but I'm going to go ahead and my recommendation is to really just, like Allison is saying, is read those newsletters. There have been many times where I might not have opened up that email and then someone brought it to my attention. And again, as a supervisor, you feel a little bit blindsided if a supervisee knows it before you do. So that, and I really love the BACB's podcast. It's not as frequent as I would love it. I would love a daily podcast, but we all know that is a lot of work as we sit on a podcast today. But listening into the BACB's insights behind the scenes, the podcast they host, they have a lot of great podcasts about supervision in general that I like to listen into when I'm walking my dogs.
I guess I'll just to wrap it up, I'll just add, I think something that's come up is just really seeking to understand the why, making sure that you're curious and really not just, it's not about memorizing things, right? It's really about getting hands-on experience, but also understanding the purpose and why behind what it is you're doing out there in the field. I think that's really important. And finding good, solid mentors is huge. It can make a world of a difference in your experience. So I think that's important.
Yeah. Can I actually add something? Because you just reminded me, Liz. The mentorship piece is huge. And a lot of people I've talked to in the field have said they had, again, lackluster or subpar supervision. Yeah. And as coming from somebody who had the same experience, don't sit on that. It's not going to get better unless you have that conversation. And if that behavior doesn't improve, there are so many BCBs out there who will give you quality supervision. You don't have to suffer where you're at because all it is going to set you up for a lot of stress in the future when you are certified because you're not prepared. So yeah, don't sit and wait. Take charge of your hours and find somebody who will provide that mentorship. And if possible, many people to provide the mentorship so you have lots of perspectives.
On that last note, that made me think I have this book on my desk, which I always recommend. It's the Supervision and Mentor Text. One of my favorites, actually, if you go to Sloan Publishing,
nice.
which we'll put in the show notes, they have all of their, I think Pepperdine University has taken the text. Every chapter has PowerPoint slides. And sometimes I bring in, there's a soft skills chapter, I think chapter 9, where they talk about soft skills and compassionate care. It's my favorite one to go over with supervisees, but the authors are LeBlanc and colleagues. We will put the reference in there. Again, I love the conversation of mentorship over supervision. We do supervise, we do support, but mentorship is really meaning that we own the relationship and we're guiding you towards really becoming our colleague and our peer. Thank you, both Katie and Allison, for joining us today. This has been fantastic. We hit up to the hour and we went over, so I apologize. This has been a wonderful episode.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on The Behavioral View. We appreciate your time and the heart you bring to this work. If you're here for a CEU, just take the quick quiz to wrap up. Let's keep talking. I'll see you next time.